What I got here is the Sony 50mm f1.4. I have never been a huge fan of the 50mm range, but there was a change of my mind when I was meeting up with Peter down in Italy. If you've been around for quite some time and watched several of my Sony lens videos, then you probably know I wasn't a huge fan of the 50mm for a very long time. It was one of those lenses that I never really liked because it was, it wasn't tight enough or it wasn't wide enough. It was kind of like the mid-ground in between. And I think that is why a lot of people like it. If you haven't been around and this is your first time watching me, hey, welcome to the channel. Hope you're gonna enjoy it. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. So a couple of weeks back, Sony actually reached out and said, hey, do you want to try out the new 50mm f1.4 lens? And I was like, 1.4? I already got the 1.2, but it also kind of like sparked the interest in me to actually see if this lens is worth it. The first thing we're going to talk about is the build quality. And as you probably know, with any GM lenses from Sony, it is a very high-end build quality. It feels very sturdy, and you got the signature kind of like lens aperture ring together with the iris lock here on the side. You have the AF/MF switch, the focus rings. I love the feeling of the focus rings on the new Sony lenses. It feels like they have definitely come to a point where they are perfect. I dare to say that. And you also have two customizable buttons on lens, which is great for when you're shooting horizontal and then switching over to vertical, and you want to make sure that your custom buttons is still by your thumb. It also has a weather sealing gasket here in the back, so you don't have to worry about taking it out in kind of like rough weather and that kind of stuff. What fascinates me the most is the size of this lens, because it is actually very small. And it feels kind of lightweight when you have it mounted to a camera as well, considering that it's a 51.4. When you compare it to like the 51.2, the 1.2 is sort of like in the front of the lens, you have a 67mm filter thread, which is great because then you don't have to go up to the big filters and you can just buy a step-up ring and use your bigger filters that you've already bought because you didn't buy one filter for each thread, right? If you did, check out step-up rings because you're gonna love it. So if you're not really that invested into camera gear and Sony cameras, then you might wonder, like, what do you use a lens like this for? For me, it's been sort of like the mid-ground between having a wide-angle lens and a tele lens. Because previously, I never saw the need to have sort of like the mid-ground between 24 and 85. I have been using Tamron 2875 for quite some time, but I never found that to be like on my lens for a long period of time because I always went for primes instead. I found the 85 to be better than the 50 all the way up until when I hang out with my friend Peter in Italy and we kind of like shot some photos with his camera, and I'm like, what lens is this? And he was saying that it was the 50 1.2, but a Canon version, and I was like, I want one, I need one. So I ordered one. What I think that the 50mm is great at is giving you sort of like a natural perspective of things. And there's a saying that you always should have a nifty 50 in your camera bag. And I think that this is a very nifty 50 since it's a 1.4, it's more lightweight than the 1.2, but it's also very expensive considering that it's a 1.4 lens and you have the option of the 1.2. The image quality of this is very good. Super high quality and sharpness overall, the frame is great. There's really not that much that I as a filmmaker can complain about on a lens like this when I'm shooting videos with it because it looks great. When it comes to the difference between 1.4 and 1.2, I think that is where a lot of people might be thinking like, should I add the extra money and get the 1.2 or should I stick with this and buy the 1.4? In my opinion, I think that the difference between 1.4 and 1.2 is barely noticeable. Looking at these two pictures, I'm gonna give you 10 to 15 seconds and you're gonna have to guess which one of these is which. Could you guess it? That's hard, right? But there's a little bit more background bokeh with the 1.2 than what you get with 1.4, but I wouldn't say that it's a deal breaker because being able to have the 1.2 is sort of like a premium thing. It's not something that a lot of people will see in your photos when you compare it with the 1.4. So in my opinion, I think that if you have the money and spend a little bit extra for the 1.2, do that, because then you're gonna be able to get the 1.2 and the 1.4 in one single lens. If you get this lens, it's gonna be like you probably would still want to have the 1.2, or at least I know that I would be like that, you know, because there's so many times where I bought a lens and then I'm like, oh crap, I should have bought that because that was the initial one that I wanted. But overall, testing this lens out, I am super happy with it. It looks great, freaking fantastic, and it fits in your camera bag. And I think that the biggest difference between the 1.2 isn't the actual image quality. I would say the size and weight is what you should consider this lens for, rather than the aperture of the lenses. If you want to go a little bit more lightweight but still have a nice wide open aperture, this is the one to go. If you have a little bit more budget and your camera bag allows for a little bit of heavier gear, then the 1.2 is definitely the way to go, because it's hands down one of my favorite lenses right now. I would love to know, what do you think about the Sony 1.4 50mm? Are you a fan of 50mm? It took me a very long time to actually become a fan of the 50mm. Drop a comment and don't forget to subscribe. Would love to see you in the next video. And have a fantastic day. Thanks for watching. Take care.